Stop Being Silent, a manifesto of a strong voice.
You're not silent because you have nothing to say. You're silent because someone once interrupted you, dismissed you, made you feel small, and from that moment on, you started speaking quieter, safer, more convenient. But the world doesn't hear those who hide their voice. This book isn't about beautiful speech. This book is about the moment when you stop shrinking yourself. Stop being silent. Your voice isn't a request. It's a manifesto. Introduction. Why your voice disappeared. You didn't become quieter. You were trained. There's a moment in everyone's life when something shifts. You're sitting in a meeting, at a family dinner, in a conversation with someone you care about, and you have something to say, something true, something that matters. But you don't say it, not because you don't know the words, not because you don't have the right. You don't say it because somewhere, deep inside, there's a voice whispering it's not worth it. They won't listen anyway. And you stay silent. This moment didn't happen once. It happened again and again, until silence became easier than speaking. Until you started believing that your voice doesn't matter. But here's the truth you need to hear right now. You didn't lose your voice. It was taken from you, slowly, quietly, by people who didn't even realize what they were doing. Every time someone talked over you, every time your opinion was dismissed as too emotional or too much, every time you were told to calm down, be reasonable, stop overreacting. Each of those moments taught you the same lesson: it's safer to stay small, and you learned that lesson well. But now, something inside you is waking up. You're starting to feel the weight of all those unspoken words, the cost of all that silence. You're realizing that the world didn't get quieter because you stopped speaking. It just stopped hearing you, and that needs to change. This book isn't a guide to public speaking. It's not about charisma or influence or winning arguments. This book is about reclaiming what was always yours, your voice, your right to be heard, your refusal to shrink anymore. Because the world doesn't need you to be quieter. It needs you to stop pretending you don't have something worth saying. Chapter 1. Silence is a learned habit. Silence feels safe until you realize how much you're losing. 1. Where the habit of holding back begins. You weren't born silent. If you've ever seen a child speak, you know this. Children don't hesitate. They don't weigh their words. They don't wonder if they're being too much. They just speak. They say what they think, what they feel, what they want. And then, slowly, the world starts teaching them otherwise. It starts small. A parent tells them to be quiet. A teacher says their question isn't important right now. A friend laughs at something they shared. And bit by bit, they learn speaking has consequences. Not always, not every time, but enough times that they start calculating. Is this worth saying? Will they listen? Will I look stupid? And the more they hesitate, the quieter they become. This is how silence begins, not as a choice, but as a survival mechanism. You learn to hold back because, at some point, speaking felt dangerous. Maybe it was a parent who shut you down when you tried to express yourself. Maybe it was a partner who made you feel like your feelings were inconvenient. Maybe it was a boss who dismissed your ideas without even considering them. Or maybe it wasn't one big moment. Maybe it was 100 small ones. Moments where you spoke up and no one really listened. Moments where you tried to contribute and someone else got the credit. Moments where you realized it's just easier to stay quiet. And now, years later, you don't even notice it anymore. You don't realize how often you swallow your words. How often you edit yourself mid-sentence. How often you decide not to speak before you even open your mouth. Because silence has become your default. But here's what you need to understand: silence isn't protecting you anymore. It's costing you. 2. Social approval and the loss of self. Here's the uncomfortable truth: most people are silent because they want to be liked. Not because they're weak, not because they're scared, because they've learned that being agreeable gets rewarded. Think about it. When you were growing up, what got praised? Obedience, politeness, not making waves. When you stayed quiet, people called you mature, easygoing, low maintenance. When you spoke up, you were difficult, sensitive, too much. So you learned to read the room, to adjust, to make yourself smaller so others would feel comfortable. And it worked. People liked you more. Conflicts disappeared. Everything felt smoother. But somewhere along the way, you stopped recognizing yourself. You started agreeing with things you didn't believe in. You started laughing at jokes that weren't funny. You started nodding along when you wanted to scream no. And the worst part, you didn't even realize it was happening. Because when you spend enough time performing for approval, you forget what your real voice sounds like. You forget what you actually think, what you actually want, what you actually believe. You become so good at being what others need you to be that you lose track of who you are. And that's the real cost of silence. Not just that people don't hear you, but that you stop hearing yourself. You become invisible, not to others, to yourself. And the saddest part is all that effort to be liked. It doesn't even work the way you think it does. Because people don't respect those who never challenge them. They don't value those who always agree. They don't remember those who never take up space. You think staying small keeps you safe, but what it actually does is make you forgettable. And deep down, you know this. You know that the people you admire most aren't the ones who stayed quiet. They're the ones who had the courage to speak, even when it was uncomfortable. Even when it cost them something. Even when they weren't sure how it would be received. And you want that for yourself. You want to stop performing. Stop shrinking. Stop pretending. You want your voice back. And the first step is understanding why you lost it in the first place. 1-3. Why strong people once stayed silent too. Here's something that might surprise you. Every person you consider strong and confident, they used to be silent too. Not all of them, not in the same way, but at some point, they also struggled to speak up. They also edited themselves, held back, played it safe, because strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you build. And you build it by refusing to stay silent anymore. Think about the people you look up to. The ones who seem unshakable. The ones who always know what to say. They weren't always like that. There was a time when they second-guessed themselves. When they worried about what others would think. When they stayed quiet because it felt easier. But at some point something shifted. Maybe they got tired of feeling invisible. Maybe they realized the cost of silence was too high. Maybe they just couldn't hold it in anymore. Whatever it was, they made a choice. They decided that being heard mattered more than being liked. They decided that their voice mattered more than other people's comfort. They decided to stop waiting for permission to speak, and that's what changed everything. Because here's the secret: confidence doesn't come before speaking. It comes from speaking. You don't wait until you feel ready. You speak, and that's how you become ready. You don't wait until you feel strong. You use your voice, and that's how you build strength. Every person who seems fearless now, they built that fearlessness one uncomfortable conversation at a time. One moment of saying what needed to be said, even when their voice shook. One moment of refusing to back down, even when they wanted to. One moment of choosing their truth over someone else's approval. And you can do this too. You don't need to be confident first. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to start. Start saying the things you've been holding back. Start trusting that your voice matters. Start refusing to shrink anymore, because silence isn't your natural state. It's just a habit you learned, and habits can be unlearned. Chapter 2. The Cost of Silence. Every time you didn't speak, the world decided for you. 2-1. Missed opportunities. Let me tell you what silence costs. It costs you the job you never applied for because you didn't think you were qualified enough. It costs you the relationship that never started because you didn't say how you felt. It costs you the idea that someone else presented because you stayed quiet in the meeting. It costs you respect, connection, growth. And the worst part, you don't even see it happening, because missed opportunities don't announce themselves. They just slip away quietly while you're busy staying safe. Think about the last time you had something important to say and didn't say it. Maybe it was in a meeting. You had an idea, a good one, but you waited for the right moment. And while you were waiting, someone else said something similar, and everyone loved it. And you sat there thinking, I was going to say that, but you didn't, and now it's too late. Or maybe it was in a relationship. You wanted to set a boundary, to say this doesn't work for me. But you didn't want to cause conflict. You didn't want to seem difficult. So you stayed quiet, and nothing changed. And months later, you're still dealing with the same issue, still feeling the same resentment, still wishing you had just said something. Or maybe it was with yourself. You wanted to go after something, a goal, a dream, a change, but you talked yourself out of it, told yourself it wasn't realistic, that you weren't ready. And now, years later, you're still in the same place, still wondering what if. This is what silence costs. Not just the words you didn't say, but the life you didn't live. Because every time you stay quiet, you're making a choice. You're choosing safety over growth. You're choosing comfort over change. You're choosing to let the world decide for you instead of deciding for yourself. And the world, it doesn't care about what you didn't say. It moves on. It gives the opportunity to someone else, someone who spoke up. And you're left wondering why things never seem to work out for you. But it's not luck. It's not timing. It's silence. It's the voice you didn't use, the risk you didn't take, the moment you let pass by. And the hardest part is, you can't get those moments back. You can't go back and apply for that job, or say what you should have said, or take that chance. What's done is done, but here's what you can do. You can stop letting it happen again. You can start recognizing the cost of silence before it's too late. You can start speaking up, even when it's uncomfortable. Because the discomfort of speaking, it's temporary, but the regret of staying silent, that lasts forever. 2. Invisibility in relationships and work. Here's what no one tells you about staying quiet. It doesn't make you easier to be around. It makes you invisible. At first, people might appreciate that you don't cause drama, that you're flexible, that you go along with whatever they want. But over time, something shifts. They stop asking your opinion. They stop considering your needs. They stop seeing you as someone with wants and desires and boundaries. You become background noise, a supporting character in someone else's story. And the worst part, it happens so gradually that you don't even notice until it's already too late. In relationships, this looks like always being the one who compromises. You let them pick the restaurant, the movie, the plans, not because you don't care, but because it's easier than negotiating, easier than risking disappointment. And at first, it feels fine. You tell yourself you're being flexible, easy to please. But then one day, they make a major decision without consulting you. And when you're hurt, they're genuinely confused. You never said it mattered to you. And they're right, you didn't. Because you'd gotten so used to staying quiet that they stopped thinking you had preferences at all. At work, it's even more insidious. You do good work, you meet deadlines, you never complain, but when promotion time comes, they give it to someone else. Someone louder, someone who makes sure people know what they've accomplished. And you feel betrayed, overlooked, undervalued. But here's the truth: you taught them to overlook you. By never speaking up, by never advocating for yourself, by assuming your work would speak for itself. But work doesn't speak. You have to speak. You have to say, I did this, I want this, I deserve this. Because if you don't, someone else will, and they'll get what should have been yours. This is the hidden cost of silence, not just that people don't hear you, but that they stop seeing you altogether. You become the person who's always there but never really present. The person who's easy to forget, easy to take for granted, easy to ignore, and you can't blame them. Because you've spent so long making yourself small that they genuinely don't know you want more. They don't know you're capable of more. They don't know you're tired of being invisible. Because you never told them. And until you do, nothing will change. 3. How silence turns into inner rage. Here's what happens when you stay silent for too long. It doesn't go away, it builds. Every time you swallow your words, they don't disappear, they pile up. Every time you bite your tongue, the resentment grows. Every time you smile and nod when you want to scream, something inside you hardens. And one day you wake up angry, not at anyone in particular, just angry. Angry at yourself for not speaking up, angry at others for not noticing, angry at the world for making it so hard to just be heard. And the worst part, you don't even know where all this anger is coming from. Because it's not about one thing, it's about everything. It's about every time you said I'm fine when you weren't. Every time you agreed when you wanted to say no. Every time you let someone cross a boundary because you didn't want to make things awkward. And now all of that unspoken truth is sitting inside you like a pressure cooker. And it has to come out somehow. Sometimes it comes out sideways, in passive-aggressive comments, in sudden outbursts over small things. You explode over something minor and everyone looks at you like you're crazy. But it's not really about the dishes, or the email, or the comment. It's about everything you didn't say for the past year, the past 5 years, the past lifetime. Sometimes it comes out inward, as self-criticism, as depression, as a constant feeling that something's wrong with you. You start believing you're the problem, that you're too sensitive, too emotional, too much. When really, you're just tired of holding everything in, and sometimes, it doesn't come out at all. It just sits there, eating away at you from the inside. Turning into bitterness, cynicism, a belief that nothing ever changes and no one ever listens. This is what happens when silence becomes chronic. It doesn't protect you, it poisons you. It doesn't keep the peace. It creates an internal war. And the only way out is to start speaking, not violently, not destructively, but honestly. To start saying what you've been holding back, to start expressing what you actually feel, to start releasing the pressure before it destroys you. Because your voice isn't just about being heard by others. It's about releasing what's inside you. It's about honoring your own truth. It's about refusing to carry all that weight alone anymore. And when you finally speak, when you finally let it out, you'll realize how much lighter you feel. How much clearer everything becomes, how much better it is to be heard, even if it's uncomfortable, than to stay silent and slowly disappear. Chapter 3. Your voice begins not in your throat. You can speak loudly and still not be heard, and the opposite is true too. 1. Internal position. Here's something most people get wrong about having a voice. They think it's about volume. They think if they just speak louder, people will listen. But you've seen it, haven't you? You've seen people who talk constantly but no one really hears them. You've seen people who dominate every conversation but somehow still feel invisible. And you've also seen the opposite. You've seen people who barely raise their voice but when they speak, the whole room goes quiet. People who don't need to repeat themselves. People who don't need to fight for attention. People whose words just land. What's the difference? It's not volume. It's not charisma. It's not even what they're saying. It's where they're speaking from. It's their internal position. Your internal position is how you see yourself, not how others see you. How you see you. It's whether you believe you have the right to take up space. Whether you believe your thoughts matter. Whether you believe you deserve to be heard. And people can feel this before you even open your mouth. They can sense whether you believe in what you're about to say. They can sense whether you're asking for permission or simply stating your truth. They can sense whether you're apologizing for existing or simply existing. And that's what determines whether they listen, not your words, your position. Think about the last time you tried to say something important and no one paid attention. Were you speaking from a place of certainty, or were you hedging? Were you clear and direct, or were you softening your words, adding maybe and I think and I could be wrong but? Were you standing in your truth, or were you already bracing for rejection? Because if you don't believe you have the right to speak, no one else will either. If you're apologizing before you even start, people will dismiss you before you even finish. If you're asking for permission to take up space, they'll assume you don't really need it. This is why changing your voice starts from the inside, not by practicing speeches, not by learning techniques, but by changing how you see yourself. By deciding that you have the right to be heard, not because you're louder, not because you're more important. Simply because you're human, and every human deserves to be heard. When you speak from that place, everything changes. Your voice doesn't shake. Your words don't apologize. Your presence doesn't ask for permission. You just speak clearly, calmly, without needing anyone's approval. And that's when people start listening, not because you forced them to, but because they can feel that you're not asking, you're simply being. And there's a power in that, a power that has nothing to do with aggression or dominance. It's the power of someone who knows their worth, who trusts their voice, who refuses to shrink. And that kind of power, you can't fake it, you have to build it from the inside out. 3.2. Why confidence is felt before words. Here's the thing about confidence, it's not something you say, it's something you carry. People feel it before you even speak. It's in how you enter a room, how you hold yourself, how you meet someone's eyes. It's in the split second before you start talking, the moment where you either brace for rejection or simply expect to be heard. And people pick up on that instantly, not consciously. They don't think, oh, this person is confident. They just feel something, a certainty, a presence, and that feeling determines whether they listen or dismiss you before you even finish your sentence. You've experienced this yourself. You've been in conversations where you could tell, within seconds, whether someone was really listening or just waiting for their turn to talk. You've met people who seemed impressive until they started speaking and you realized there was nothing behind the performance. And you've met people who seemed quiet, even shy, but when they spoke, you found yourself leaning in, wanting to hear more. What's the difference? It's not what they said, it's what they believed about themselves. The confident person doesn't need to convince you. They're not performing. They're not trying to prove anything. They're just there, fully, unapologetically, and that presence creates space. It invites listening. The insecure person, no matter how loud or eloquent, is always asking for validation. They're trying to earn your attention, trying to prove they deserve it. And ironically, that's exactly what makes people tune them out. Because people don't respect those who are constantly seeking approval. They respect those who don't need it. So how do you build that kind of confidence? Not by faking it, not by pretending, but by doing the internal work. By questioning the beliefs that tell you you're not enough. By challenging the voice that says you don't have the right to speak. By practicing taking up space, even when it feels uncomfortable. By speaking up in small moments so that when the big moments come, your voice is already strong. By refusing to apologize for existing. By trusting that your thoughts, your feelings, your perspective matter. Not because you're special, but because you're human. And every human has inherent worth, inherent value, inherent right to be heard. When you truly believe that, when you internalize that, you won't need to convince anyone. You'll just speak and they'll listen. Because confidence isn't loud, it's quiet, it's steady. It's the calm certainty of someone who knows their worth. And that's the most powerful voice of all. 3.3. What people actually hear. Here's what most people don't realize when you speak. People aren't just hearing your words. They're hearing everything behind them. They're hearing your certainty or your doubt. They're hearing your conviction or your hesitation. They're hearing whether you believe what you're saying or whether you're just testing the waters. And that's what they respond to, not the content, the energy. You can say the exact same sentence 2 different ways and get completely different reactions. You can say, I think we should try a different approach while looking at the floor, and people will ignore you. You can say the exact same words while looking directly at them, with calm certainty, and suddenly it's a good idea. Same words, different energy, different result. Because people don't just process language, they process emotion, intention, presence. They can tell when you're speaking from a place of truth versus when you're performing. They can tell when you believe what you're saying versus when you're just saying what you think they want to hear. They can tell when you're asking for permission versus when you're simply stating reality. And they respond accordingly. This is why so many people feel unheard even when they're speaking. Because they're not really speaking. They're testing. They're putting their words out tentatively, ready to pull them back if no one responds well. They're hedging, softening, qualifying. I might be wrong, but This is just my opinion, but I don't know if this makes sense. But, and every one of those phrases tells people you don't have to take me seriously. It's a preemptive apology, a way of protecting yourself from rejection. But it guarantees the very rejection you're trying to avoid, because people respond to certainty. Not arrogance, not aggression, just calm, clear certainty, the kind that says this is what I see, this is what I think, this is what I believe. Not you have to agree with me, just this is my truth. And when you speak from that place, people listen, not because you're forcing them to, but because there's nothing to negotiate. You're not asking for validation, you're not seeking approval, you're simply offering your perspective. And that clarity, that directness, that refusal to apologize for existing is magnetic. It creates respect, it invites engagement, it makes people want to hear what you have to say. So stop focusing on finding the perfect words, stop trying to craft the perfect argument. Instead, focus on the energy behind your words, speak from a place of truth, of certainty, of self-respect, and watch how differently people respond. Not to what you're saying, but to who you're being when you say it. Chapter 4. The Fear of Being Inconvenient. The strongest words are the ones you're afraid will make people stop loving you. 1. Fear of judgment. Let's talk about the real reason you stay silent. It's not because you don't know what to say. It's not because you don't have strong opinions. It's because you're terrified of what will happen if you say them. You're afraid of being judged, criticized, rejected. You're afraid that if you speak your truth, people will decide you're too much, too difficult, too something. And that fear is so powerful that it stops you before you even start. You play out the worst-case scenario in your head. You imagine them rolling their eyes, laughing at you, getting angry. You imagine the conversation going wrong, the relationship falling apart, everything changing, and so you stay quiet. Because silence feels safer than risking all of that. But here's what you need to understand: that fear you're feeling, it's not protecting you. It's controlling you. It's deciding what you say, what you do, who you become. It's keeping you small, keeping you hidden, keeping you from living fully. And the worst part, most of the time, the things you're afraid of never actually happen. You stay silent because you think people will judge you, but when you finally speak, they usually just listen. You think they'll reject you. But often they respect you more for being honest. You think everything will fall apart. But most of the time, nothing dramatic happens at all. The fear was bigger than the reality. And you wasted years staying quiet over something that was never really a threat. But even when the judgment does come, even when people do react badly, here's what you need to know. Their reaction says more about them than it does about you. If someone can't handle you having a different opinion, that's their limitation, not yours. If someone needs you to always agree with them, they don't want a relationship with you. They want a mirror. If someone only likes you when you're convenient, they don't actually like you. They like what you do for them, and realizing that is painful, but it's also freeing. Because it means you can stop performing, you can stop editing yourself, you can stop trying to be whoever you think they need you to be. You can just be yourself, and yes, some people won't like it. Some people will judge you, some people will walk away, but the ones who stay, they'll be staying for the real you, not the version you've been performing. Not the one who's always agreeable and easy and small, the real you. The one with opinions and boundaries and a voice. And those relationships will be so much better than the ones built on silence ever were. Because they'll be built on truth, and truth is the only foundation that lasts. 2. The need to be liked. Here's the brutal truth: you can't have a strong voice and be liked by everyone. You have to choose. And most people choose being liked, not consciously, not deliberately, but in 1,000 small moments. They choose comfort over truth. They choose agreement over honesty. They choose being easy over being real. Because somewhere along the way, they learned that being liked is the most important thing. That approval is safety, that acceptance is survival, and so they spend their entire lives shape-shifting, becoming whoever they need to be for whoever they're with. Agreeing with their boss even when they disagree, laughing at jokes that aren't funny, pretending to like things they don't care about, hiding opinions that might be controversial, avoiding topics that might create tension, and they tell themselves it's fine. It's just being polite, being respectful, being mature, but it's not. It's disappearing. It's erasing yourself bit by bit until there's nothing left but a reflection of what everyone else wants. And the saddest part, it doesn't even work. Because people don't actually like you more when you agree with everything they say. They just find you forgettable. You become the person they're comfortable with but never think about. The person they enjoy having around but don't really know. The person who's always there but somehow never really present. Because you can't be known if you're never honest. You can't be loved if no one knows who you actually are. You can't build real connection if you're always performing. And deep down, you know this. You know that the relationships that matter most are the ones where you can be yourself. Where you can disagree and still be respected. Where you can say no and still be valued. Where you can have boundaries and still be loved, but you're afraid to test it. You're afraid that if you stop being so agreeable, people will leave. And maybe some will. The ones who only liked you because you were easy. The ones who needed you to be small so they could feel big. The ones who never really cared about you, just what you did for them. But losing those people isn't a loss, it's liberation, because it creates space for the people who will love you for real. The ones who want to know what you actually think. The ones who value your honesty even when it's uncomfortable. The ones who respect you more when you set boundaries, not less. Those are the people worth keeping, and you'll never find them if you're too busy trying to please everyone else. So here's the choice you need to make. Do you want to be liked by everyone and known by no one? Or do you want to be truly seen, truly valued, truly loved by the people who matter? You can have both, and the sooner you accept that, the sooner you can stop performing and start living. 3. Why comfort kills respect. Here's something no one wants to admit: people don't respect those who never challenge them. They might like them, they might find them easy to be around. But they don't respect them, because respect isn't given to people who always say yes. It's given to people who know when to say no. It's given to people who have boundaries, who have standards, who have a backbone. It's given to people who will speak up even when it's uncomfortable. Think about the people you respect most in your life. Are they the ones who always agreed with you, who never pushed back, who made everything easy? Or are they the ones who challenged you, who told you hard truths, who weren't afraid to disagree? The ones who said, "I love you, but I don't agree with that." The ones who said, "No, I can't do that," without guilt or apology. The ones who held their ground even when you pushed. Those are the people you respect. Not because they were difficult, but because they were real. Because they showed you that they value themselves enough to have limits, that they respect themselves enough to not bend into whatever shape you needed. That they trust their own judgment enough to stand by it, even when you disagreed, and that earned your respect, even if it wasn't always comfortable. Now think about yourself. How often do you challenge people? How often do you say no? How often do you express disagreement? If the answer is rarely or never, you're not earning respect, you're earning comfort. And comfort is nice, but it's not the same as respect. Comfort is what people feel around someone who doesn't rock the boat. Respect is what people feel for someone who knows their worth. Comfort is passive, respect is active. Comfort is easy to find. Respect is hard to earn. And if you want to be more than just background noise in people's lives, you need to be willing to make them uncomfortable sometimes. Not by being cruel, not by being aggressive, but by being honest. By saying what needs to be said, even when it's hard. By holding your boundaries, even when people push. By refusing to shrink, even when it would be easier, because that's what builds respect. Not agreement, not convenience, truth. And yes, some people won't like it. Some people will be uncomfortable when you stop being so easy. Some people will push back when you start having boundaries. But those people were never respecting you anyway. They were just enjoying how convenient you were. And that's not respect, that's use. Real respect comes from people who see you stand your ground and think, "I admire that." Even if they disagree with you, even if it means they don't always get their way, even if it makes things more complicated. They respect you because you respect yourself, and that's the only respect worth having. Chapter 5. Speaking doesn't mean attacking. Strength isn't in the scream, strength is in the clarity. 1. Clear speech without aggression. Here's a misconception that keeps a lot of people silent. They think having a voice means being aggressive. They think speaking up means yelling, fighting, dominating. And because they don't want to be that kind of person, they don't speak at all, but that's a false choice. You don't have to choose between silence and aggression. There's a third option: clarity. Clarity is speaking your truth without attacking. It's stating your position without needing to destroy someone else's. It's saying this is what I need without saying you're wrong for not giving it to me. Clarity is powerful because it doesn't need volume. It doesn't need anger. It doesn't need to prove anything. It just is. Think about the last time someone spoke to you with real clarity. They didn't raise their voice. They didn't get emotional. They just said, calmly and directly, what they needed to say. And you heard them, really heard them, not because they forced you to, but because there was nothing to push against. They weren't attacking. They weren't blaming. They weren't manipulating. They were just clear, and that clarity created space for you to actually listen. This is what most people miss about having a strong voice. They think they need to be louder, more forceful, more intense. But volume isn't power. Clarity is. When you know exactly what you want to say and you say it directly, you don't need to yell. When you're not seeking approval, you don't need to convince. When you're not afraid of the response, you don't need to attack preemptively. You just speak, plainly, honestly. I don't agree with that. This doesn't work for me. I need something different. No drama, no aggression, no performance. Just truth. And that's harder than it sounds, because it requires you to let go of the need to control how people respond. It requires you to trust that your truth is enough, even if it's not well received. It requires you to be okay with people disagreeing, being uncomfortable, even being upset. Because you're not responsible for managing their emotions. You're only responsible for speaking your truth. And when you do that without aggression, something interesting happens. People actually hear you better, because they're not busy defending themselves. They're not reacting to your tone or your anger. They're just listening. And even if they disagree, they respect how you said it. Because clarity without aggression is rare, and it's powerful, not in a loud way, in a quiet, undeniable way. It's the power of someone who doesn't need to fight because they're not afraid of being heard. And that's the voice you want to build. 2. How to communicate your position calmly. So how do you actually do this? How do you speak clearly without aggression? It starts with separating your emotions from your message. Your emotions are valid. They matter. They're telling me something important. But they don't need to be the delivery system for your message. You can feel angry and still speak calmly. You can feel hurt and still be direct. You can feel frustrated and still be clear. The key is to process the emotion first, then communicate the need. Most people do it backwards. They feel something and immediately react. They speak from the heat of the emotion, and that's when things escalate. That's when conversations become fights. That's when people stop listening and start defending. But when you take a breath, when you let the initial wave pass, you can access the clarity underneath. You can identify what you actually need to say, not what you want to yell, what you need to communicate, and then you can say it in a way that people can actually hear. Here's the structure: state the fact, not your interpretation, the observable fact. You interrupted me 3 times in that meeting, not you always disrespect me. That's interpretation, that's accusation. Just the fact, then state the impact. When that happens, I feel like my input doesn't matter. Not you're trying to silence me, that's mind reading, that's escalation. Just the impact on you, then state what you need. I need to be able to finish my thoughts. Not you need to stop being so rude, that's attacking, that's control. Just what you need, that's it. Fact, impact, need, no blame, no attack, no drama, just clear, calm communication. And most of the time, when you speak like this, people actually respond well. Because you're not putting them on the defensive. You're not attacking their character. You're just describing your experience and stating your need. And that's something they can work with. Now, will this always work? No, some people will still get defensive. Some people will still push back. But that's not your responsibility. You can't control how people respond. You can only control how you communicate. And when you do it with clarity and calm, you can walk away knowing you showed up as your best self. You didn't shrink. You didn't explode. You just spoke your truth. And that's all you can ever do. 5.3. The difference between defense and confidence. There's a subtle but crucial difference between speaking from defense and speaking from confidence. And most people can't tell the difference until it's pointed out to them. Defense is reactive. It's protecting. It's proving. Confidence is grounded. It's stating. It's trusting. Defense says you're wrong and I'm going to show you why. Confidence says here's what I see. You're free to disagree. Defense needs you to change your mind. Confidence is okay if you don't. Defense is loud because it's afraid of not being heard. Confidence is calm because it trusts its own worth. And people can feel the difference immediately. When you speak from defense, you're essentially saying, please validate me. Please agree with me. Please see that I'm right. You're seeking external confirmation. And ironically, that neediness makes people less likely to give it to you. When you speak from confidence, you're saying this is what I believe. This is what I know. This is my truth. You're not asking permission. You're not seeking approval. You're just being. And that groundedness is magnetic. It invites respect, even from people who disagree. Because confidence isn't about being right. It's about being certain of your own experience. It's about trusting your perspective even when others don't share it. It's about knowing that you don't need everyone to agree with you for your truth to be valid. This is why confident people can stay calm in disagreements. They're not trying to win. They're not trying to convince. They're just sharing their view and letting others have theirs. And that takes the heat out of the conversation. It turns conflict into dialogue. It turns argument into exchange. Because when you're not defending, there's nothing to attack. So how do you shift from defense to confidence? You stop trying to control the outcome. You stop needing to be right. You stop seeking validation from the other person. You just speak your truth and let it land however it lands. You trust that your perspective is valid even if no one else sees it. You trust that you're worthy even if someone disagrees with you. You trust that you can handle whatever response comes. And when you trust that, when you really believe it, your voice changes. It softens, it steadies, it stops needing anything from anyone. And that's when you become truly powerful. Not because you're louder or more forceful, but because you're no longer afraid. And fearlessness, quiet fearlessness, is the strongest voice of all. Chapter 6. Silence as a tool. Sometimes the strongest voice is the pause. 6.1. How to not fill silence with justifications. Here's something that separates strong voices from weak ones: how they handle silence. Weak voices panic in silence. They rush to fill it. Strong voices rest in silence. They let it breathe. And people feel the difference. Think about the last time you stated a boundary or said something important. What did you do after you said it? Did you let it sit? Let the other person process it? Or did you immediately start explaining, justifying, softening? I can't do that. I mean, it's just that I'm really busy right now. And I know you need help, and I feel bad saying no. But I just think maybe this time I need to prioritize other things, you know. Everything after I can't do that weakened your message, because it signaled I'm not actually sure about this. I'm open to being convinced otherwise, and people sense that. They sense the opening, the weakness. And if they want to push, that's when they push. But watch what happens when you just stop. I can't do that. Silence. That silence is uncomfortable. You'll want to fill it. You'll feel pressure to explain, to soften, to make them feel better about your no. But don't. Just let it sit. Let them sit with it. Let the discomfort exist without rushing to fix it. Because that discomfort is doing important work. It's communicating that you're serious. It's showing that you're not negotiating. It's demonstrating that your boundary is real, not a starting point for discussion. And most of the time, people will accept it, not immediately. They might try once to push. Are you sure? I really need help with this. And this is where most people cave. This is where they start justifying. But you don't have to. You can just repeat yourself, I understand. And I still can't do that. And then, silence again. No explanation, no apology, no justification, just calm repetition. And almost always, people back off because they realize you mean it. Not because you were aggressive, but because you weren't apologetic. You stated your truth and let it stand. This is the power of silence. It's not empty space, it's emphasis. It's the period at the end of your sentence. It's what turns a statement into a position. And the more comfortable you get with silence, the more powerful your voice becomes. Because you stop needing to convince people. You stop needing to manage their emotions. You just speak your truth and let it be. And that confidence, that willingness to let your words stand on their own, is what makes people take you seriously. Not your volume, not your explanations, your silence. 6.2. Why pauses strengthen words. There's a rhythm to powerful speech that most people never learn. It's not about speaking faster or saying more. It's about knowing when to pause. Pauses are where meaning lives. They're where your words sink in. They're where people catch up with what you just said. Without pauses, you're just creating noise. With pauses, you're creating impact. Watch any great speaker, any powerful communicator. They don't rush. They don't fill every second with words. They speak. They pause. They let it land. And that landing is everything. Because it gives people time to feel what you just said. Time to process. Time to understand. Time to be moved. When you rush through your words, people hear them, but they don't absorb them. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose. Too much, too fast. But when you pause, you're allowing space. Space for the weight of your words to be felt. Space for the meaning to settle. Space for people to realize this person isn't performing. They're speaking from somewhere real, and that creates connection. That creates trust. That makes people lean in instead of tune out. This is especially important when you're saying something difficult. When you're setting a boundary, when you're disagreeing, when you're being vulnerable, the pause before you speak shows you're considering your words. The pause after you speak shows you mean them, and both create respect. Because pauses demonstrate control. They show you're not afraid of silence. They show you're not desperate to be liked. They show you trust that your words are enough without needing to pile more on top of them. So practice pausing. Not awkwardly, not uncertainly, but deliberately, confidently. Say what you need to say, then stop. Let it breathe. Let them process. Let the weight of your words do the work. Because your voice isn't just the sounds you make. It's the space you create around those sounds. And that space is where true power lives. 6.3. Controlling the rhythm of conversation. Here's something most people don't realize: conversations have rhythm, and whoever controls the rhythm controls the conversation. Not in a manipulative way, in a centered way. When you're anxious, you speed up, you rush, you follow someone else's pace. When you're centered, you set your own rhythm, and people naturally match it. Think about the last time you were in a heated conversation. The other person was talking fast, getting more intense. What did you do? If you're like most people, you match them. You started talking faster too, getting more intense too, and suddenly you're in an argument that neither of you wanted. But what if you didn't match them? What if you slowed down instead? What if you spoke slower, calmer, more deliberately? Something interesting happens. They slow down too, not always immediately, but usually within a minute or two. Because your calm becomes contagious. Your groundedness pulls them out of their escalation. Your rhythm resets the conversation. This is the power of controlling pace. It's not about controlling the other person. It's about controlling yourself. About refusing to get pulled into their energy. About staying grounded in your own rhythm no matter how they show up. And you can do this in any conversation, not just heated ones. If someone's talking too fast, you can slow them down by slowing yourself down. If someone's being vague, you can bring clarity by being clear yourself. If someone's being aggressive, you can create safety by staying calm. You set the tone, you set the pace, you create the container. Not by force, just by being unwavering in your own center. This is what it means to have a strong voice. It's not about overpowering others. It's about not being overpowered. It's about maintaining your own rhythm even when others try to throw you off. And the more you practice this, the more you realize you have more control than you thought. Not over other people, but over yourself. Over how you show up, how you respond, how you speak. And when you're in control of yourself, you don't need to control anyone else. You just speak your truth at your own pace in your own way. And that's all the power you need. Chapter 7. When people start to hear you. It happens suddenly. People stop interrupting. 7.1. The shift in how others respond. There's a moment, and you'll know it when it happens, when people start treating you differently. They don't interrupt you anymore. They actually listen when you speak. They ask for your opinion instead of assuming you don't have one. And it feels strange, because you're so used to being talked over, being dismissed, being invisible. And suddenly you're not. Suddenly people are paying attention. They're making space for your words. They're treating what you say as if it matters. And it does. It always did, but now they see it too. The shift doesn't happen overnight. It's not that you wake up one day and suddenly everyone respects you. It's gradual, incremental. It starts with one conversation where you don't back down. One moment where you state your boundary and hold it. One time where you say what you really think instead of what you think they want to hear. And nothing catastrophic happens. In fact, something interesting happens. They respect you more. Not less, more. And that gives you courage to do it again and again. And slowly, over time, people start adjusting how they interact with you. They stop assuming you'll always say yes. They stop talking over you because you've shown you won't let them. They stop dismissing your ideas because you've shown you stand behind them. And the relationships change. Not always for the better, to be honest. Some people won't like the new you. Some people were comfortable with you being small. And when you stop being small, they get uncomfortable. But the ones who matter, the ones who actually care about you, will adjust. They might be surprised at first. They might need time to calibrate. But they'll come around. Because real relationships can handle growth. Real relationships want both people to be whole. Real relationships don't need you to stay small to function. And the new people you meet, the ones who never knew the silent version of you, they'll just see you as you are now. Strong, clear, confident, and they'll treat you that way from the start. And you'll realize this is how it could have always been. If only you'd known you had the right to take up space. If only you'd trusted your voice sooner. But you know now, and that's what matters. 7.2. A new level of respect. Here's what's interesting about respect. You can't demand it. You can only earn it. And you earn it not by being perfect, but by being consistent. By showing up as yourself again and again, even when it's uncomfortable. By holding your boundaries, even when people push. By speaking your truth, even when it would be easier to stay quiet. And people notice. They might not say anything. They might not explicitly acknowledge the change. But they feel it. They feel that you're different now. That you're not someone they can manipulate or dismiss anymore. That you have a center, a core that isn't movable. And that creates respect. Not the kind you have to ask for. Not the kind you have to prove. The kind that's just there. In how they speak to you. In how they consider your opinions. In how they treat your time and energy. You'll notice it in small ways first. Someone who used to interrupt you now waits for you to finish. Someone who used to dismiss your ideas now actually considers them. Someone who used to assume you'd always help now asks instead of demands. These are tiny shifts, but they matter because they show that the way you see yourself has changed how others see you. You stopped treating yourself as optional, so they stopped treating you that way too. You stopped apologizing for existing, so they stopped expecting you to. You stopped shrinking, so they stopped expecting you to fit into smaller spaces. And this new respect, it feels different than anything you've experienced before. Because it's not based on what you do for people, it's based on who you are. It's not transactional, it's foundational. It's not something you have to maintain by constantly performing. It's something that exists because you've shown consistently that you respect yourself, and people follow your lead. If you treat yourself as valuable, they treat you as valuable. If you treat your voice as important, they treat your voice as important. If you treat your boundaries as non-negotiable, they treat them as non-negotiable. This is the power of self-respect. It radiates outward. It changes not just how you feel, but how others respond to you. And once you experience it, once you feel what it's like to be genuinely respected, you'll never want to go back. You'll never want to shrink again. You'll never want to silence yourself again. Because this feeling of being seen and valued for who you actually are is what you've been searching for all along. And the irony is, you had to give it to yourself first before anyone else could. 7.3. What to do when your voice returns. So what do you do when you finally have your voice back? When you can speak without fear, without hesitation, without that constant internal editing? First you breathe, because it's been a long time since you felt this free. It's been a long time since you trusted yourself this much. It's been a long time since you took up space without apologizing for it. And that freedom, that relief, it's worth acknowledging. You did this. You reclaimed something that was always yours, but that you'd forgotten how to access. And that's no small thing. But here's what's important. Having your voice back doesn't mean you have to use it all the time. It doesn't mean you have to speak in every situation. It doesn't mean you're suddenly obligated to share every thought and feeling. Having a voice means having a choice. It means you can speak when it matters and stay silent when it doesn't. It means you can engage when it's worth it and walk away when it's not. It means you're no longer silencing yourself out of fear, but choosing your battles wisely. Because not everything deserves your energy. Not every argument is worth having. Not every person is worth convincing. And now that you have your voice, you get to decide when and where to use it. That's the real power. Not speaking all the time, but knowing you can. Not fighting every battle, but knowing you're capable of fighting when it matters. Not proving yourself to everyone, but knowing your worth doesn't depend on anyone's validation. And as you move forward with this new voice, this reclaimed voice, you'll notice something else. You'll start attracting different people. People who value honesty, who appreciate directness, who respect boundaries. People who don't need you to be small to feel comfortable. People who want to know the real you, not the performed version. And you'll start letting go of the relationships that only worked when you were silent. Not with anger, not with drama, just with clarity. Some relationships won't survive your growth, and that's okay. They served a purpose. They were right for who you were then. But they're not right for who you are now, and that's not a failure, that's evolution. You're becoming more yourself, and that means some things have to fall away to make room for what's coming. So when your voice returns, use it wisely. Speak when it matters. Stay silent when it serves you. Set boundaries without guilt. Share your truth without apology. Take up space without permission, because this is your life, and you get to decide how you show up in it. No one else gets that power, not anymore. Chapter 8. Manifesto of a Strong Voice. You don't ask if you can speak anymore. 8.1. Internal Principles. Here's what changes when you have a strong voice. It's not what you say. It's what you believe about yourself. These are the internal principles that hold everything together. The truths you carry that no one can take from you. 1. Your voice matters, not because of what you achieve or who validates you, but because you're human, and every human deserves to be heard. 2. You don't need permission to speak, not from your parents, not from your partner, not from your boss, not from society. If you have something to say, you have the right to say it. 3. Being liked is not more important than being real. Some people will appreciate your honesty, some won't, and that's not your problem to fix. 4. Silence is a choice, not a requirement. You can choose to stay quiet when it serves you, but you will never again silence yourself out of fear. 5. Your boundaries are not negotiable. You can explain them if you want, but you don't owe anyone a justification for protecting your peace. 6. Disagreement is not disrespect. You can honor someone and still disagree with them. You can love someone and still say no to them. Conflict is not the end of connection. Sometimes it's the beginning of real connection. 7. You are not responsible for other people's emotions. You can be kind. You can be considerate, but you cannot manage how someone feels about your truth. That's their work, not yours. 8. Clarity is kindness. Staying silent to avoid conflict doesn't protect people. It misleads them. Honesty, even uncomfortable honesty, is more respectful than false agreement. 9. You don't have to explain yourself into acceptability. If someone doesn't understand after you've stated it clearly, more words won't help. Some people don't want to understand, and that's okay. You can still hold your position. 10. Your voice is not a weapon. It's not meant to hurt or dominate or win. It's meant to express, to connect, to be true. When you speak from this place, you don't need aggression. You just need honesty. These principles don't guarantee that speaking will always be easy. They don't promise that everyone will respond well. They don't eliminate discomfort or conflict or rejection, but they give you something more important than comfort. They give you integrity. They give you self-respect. They give you the ability to look at yourself in the mirror and recognize who you see. Because you're no longer hiding. You're no longer performing. You're no longer shrinking into someone you're not. You're just you. Fully, unapologetically, powerfully, and that's worth every uncomfortable conversation. That's worth every relationship that couldn't handle your growth. That's worth every moment of doubt or fear or uncertainty, because living as yourself, speaking as yourself, being yourself, is the only life worth living. Everything else is just existing, and you're done with just existing. 8.2. A new contract with yourself. You need to make a commitment, not to others, to yourself. This is the contract you're signing, the promise you're making, the line you're drawing. I will no longer shrink myself to make others comfortable. I will no longer silence my truth to avoid conflict. I will no longer apologize for taking up space. I will speak when something matters, even if my voice shakes. I will say no without guilt when something doesn't serve me. I will set boundaries and hold them, even when people push. I will stop performing and start being. I will stop seeking approval and start trusting myself. I will stop waiting for permission and start claiming my right to exist fully. I will honor my feelings, my needs, my voice. Not because I'm selfish, but because I'm human, and being human means having inherent worth. Worth that doesn't need to be earned. Worth that doesn't need to be justified. Worth that simply is. This is the contract. And unlike the ones you've been living under, the ones that said you had to be small, quiet, convenient, this one is yours. You wrote it, you signed it, you hold yourself to it. No one else gets to edit it. No one else gets to approve it. This is between you and you. And every day you honor it, not perfectly. You'll still have moments of doubt, moments where you slip back into old patterns. Moments where you stay quiet when you should have spoken. That's okay, that's human. The contract doesn't require perfection. It just requires commitment. It requires that you keep coming back to yourself, that you keep choosing your truth, even when it's hard, that you keep showing up, even when you'd rather hide, because this is how you change. Not in one big dramatic moment, but in 1,000 small choices. Every time you speak up instead of staying silent, every time you hold a boundary instead of caving, every time you choose your truth over someone else's comfort. Each of those moments is a vote for the person you're becoming. And over time, those votes add up. They reshape your life. They reshape your relationships. They reshape your sense of self. Until one day you look around and realize you're living differently now. You're showing up differently. You're being treated differently. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You stopped accepting less than you deserve. You stopped shrinking. You stopped silencing yourself. And that changed everything. This is your contract. This is your commitment. This is your manifesto. Honor it, live it, breathe it, because it's the foundation of everything you're building. And what you're building is a life where your voice matters, where you matter, where you're finally, fully, unapologetically yourself. And that's the only life worth living. 8.3. Voice is part of identity. Your voice isn't separate from who you are. It is who you are. It's how you show the world what's inside you. It's how you connect, how you create, how you exist in relation to others. For too long, you treated your voice as optional, as something you could turn on or off depending on the situation, as something that only mattered in certain contexts with certain people. But that's not how it works. Your voice is always present, even when you're not using it. Even when you're staying silent, you're communicating something. You're communicating that you don't matter, that what you think isn't important, that you're okay being invisible, and that becomes part of your identity. Not who you really are, but who you've been trained to be. The person who stays quiet, who doesn't make waves, who's easy to be around. But now you're reclaiming your voice, and that means reclaiming your identity. It means deciding consciously who you want to be, not who others need you to be, who you actually are. And that person, the real you, has opinions, has boundaries, has needs. That person doesn't apologize for existing, doesn't shrink to fit, doesn't perform to please. That person just is. Fully present, fully honest, fully alive. And when you start living as that person, when you start speaking as that person, everything changes because you're no longer split. You're no longer one person on the inside and another person on the outside. You're integrated, whole. What you think, you say. What you feel, you express. What you need, you ask for. There's no gap between your internal world and your external one. And that integrity, that wholeness, it radiates. People feel it. They're drawn to it. Because authenticity is magnetic, not performance, not perfection, just realness. Just someone who's brave enough to be exactly who they are. And that's what your voice is now. Not a tool you use sometimes, but an expression of your essence. It's how you show up, how you connect, how you exist. It's inseparable from your identity. You are someone who speaks, who takes up space, who refuses to shrink. Not because you're aggressive or dominating, but because you've decided that your existence matters, that your truth matters, that you matter. And that's not arrogance, that's not selfishness, that's just basic human dignity. And you've claimed it, finally. After all this time, you've claimed your right to be heard. Your right to take up space, your right to exist fully and loudly and unapologetically. This is who you are now. Someone with a voice, someone with a presence, someone who matters. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are. And no one can take that from you ever again. Conclusion: you don't stay silent anymore. The world won't get quieter, but now it holds your voice, and that's enough to change everything. You're at the end of this book, but you're at the beginning of something else. A new way of being, a new way of speaking, a new way of existing in the world. You came here because something inside you was tired of being silent. Tired of shrinking, tired of disappearing, and maybe you didn't know how to change it. Maybe you thought it was just who you were, but now you know the truth. Silence wasn't your nature, it was your conditioning. It was what you learned when speaking felt dangerous, when being yourself felt risky, when taking up space felt like too much. But you're not that person anymore. You're someone who understands that having a voice isn't about volume or charisma or perfect words. It's about internal position, it's about self-respect, it's about refusing to shrink. You're someone who knows that silence has a cost, and you're no longer willing to pay it. You're someone who can speak clearly without aggression, who can set boundaries without guilt, who can take up space without apology. You're someone who understands that not everyone will like it, and that's okay. Because being liked was never the goal, being real was, and you're real now, fully, finally. The world hasn't changed. It's still loud and chaotic and full of people trying to be heard. But now you're one of them, not fighting for attention, not performing for approval, just existing, speaking, being, and that's enough. Your voice is enough, you are enough, you always were, you just forgot for a while. But you remember now, and you're not going back. You're not going back to silence, to shrinking, to disappearing. You're moving forward, with your voice, with your truth, with your whole self, and the world will adjust. Some people will respect you more, some people will drift away. New connections will form, old patterns will break, and through all of it, you'll remain steady, because you're no longer dependent on external validation. You're grounded in something deeper, in the knowledge that you matter, that your voice matters, that your existence matters, and that knowledge, that certainty is unshakable. It's yours now. And nothing, no one can take it away. So speak, take up space, exist fully, not because you're perfect, not because you have it all figured out, but because you're human, and being human means you have the right to be heard. The world won't get quieter, but now it holds your voice, and that's enough to change everything.